Welcome to the Untold Story podcast, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum, and I really love the title of this podcast, and I take it seriously because I love hearing the things that you're not necessarily hearing from people when they're on Fox, because they have such rich personal stories. So without further ado, I want to dig right in because I'm thrilled to be joined today by Nicole Parker. You obviously see her on our air all the time. She's a former FBI special agent. She has a brand new book called The Two FBIs, The Bravery and Betrayal I Saw in My Time at the Bureau. Nicole, it's great to have you. Great to have you with us.
It is my pleasure. I absolutely respect you and your work, and I'm just honored to be here.
You're so kind. Well, I have learned more about you just preparing for this podcast today, but I want everyone to know that when you were at the FBI, you were recognized over and over again for your extraordinary service. You were a special agent in the Miami field office, focused on human trafficking and violent crimes. Active shooting situations, manhunts, the school shootings. Nicole was the FBI's highest ranking violent crime and fugitive task force leader. She also received 3 Law Enforcement Officer of the Year awards from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida and a Medal of Excellence from the FBI Directory. She was the special agent in charge at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, which tore all of our hearts. It was so incredibly tragic, and I know she has seen things in that situation that all of us, it would break our hearts, obviously, to see and to endure, but she was there to help people. And all of this after she was in investor relations at Canyon Partners, vice president of Bank of America, and investment associate at Merrill Lynch. So it's just great to see you, Nicole, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you so much.
So I want to hear a little bit about your personal story, because I think you've had 2 sort of really big shifts here. You're in finance, you're in your late 20s, maybe 30 years old. What made you decide, actually, I'm leaving all this, I'm going to go join the FBI?
So I was actually a witness to the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York City while I was working at Merrill Lynch. I was at the World Financial Center. I came through Tower 1, the North Tower of the World Trade Center, every morning to commute. And I witnessed the absolute horror and terror that occurred in our country. And I was barely 23 years old. You know, I'd moved to New York I was a Texan. And to see that was so disturbing and shocking, not just for our country, but for the whole world. And it made a very deep impact on me, to the point where on my elevator ride out of my building, trying to escape, I had this epiphany, and I just felt strongly. And it was, Nicole, you need to use this to help others. And one day you're going to go back and you're going to serve your country, and you're going to give back, and you're going to stand as a witness of God. And I never forgot that moment in the elevator. And I went on to work in finance. I continued through many years. I worked at, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America Securities, doing prime brokerage. And then I went to a hedge fund out in Beverly Hills. But Martha, there was something missing, because I never forgot that vow that I made to myself and to God. I will go back and do something to serve. And it was actually a meeting with a former Wall Street colleague here in New York City. And we went to a cafe on Fifth Avenue. I'll never forget. And he said, Nicole, have you ever considered applying to the FBI? And I looked at him like he was crazy. I said, absolutely no. I have never thought of that. I don't come from a law enforcement family. I have a tremendous amount of respect for law enforcement and military, but no, I haven't thought of that. And this was around the time of the subprime mortgage meltdown. And he said, you know what? You would be phenomenal. They could send you undercover into all these firms, and you understand finance. And so you can go bust up all of these people. And I thought, you know what? That's kind of interesting. And I actually knew one FBI agent in Los Angeles at the time, and he had the most fascinating and intriguing stories. I mean, I'll never forget, I was at a party once, and I saw his ankle holster with his gun on his ankle. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. And he's like, yeah, I'm an FBI agent. And I thought, that's kind of fascinating. I went back from the trip to New York when I was visiting my friend. I went to FBI.gov and I applied.
I love it, because I love it when people sort of allow their own gut, and you say that, you felt that God was speaking to you in that moment, and then trust it. So you're accepted into the training program, and you go to Quantico for what is essentially, what we think of as intense boot camp training. What was that like?
It was pure hell. I'll be honest, it was really horrible. How long does
pure hell last?
I entered on August 1st of 2010, and I graduated around January of the following year. It was intense.
And you were 32 at the time, you said?
I was barely 32 years old. And again, that's what the FBI wanted at that time. They wanted people, this is your second career. You have something already under your belt. I went to Quantico. I had no idea what to expect, Martha. I'd never been the type to watch the movies and TV shows about the FBI. So I got in there and I'm like, you know what? This can't be that difficult. It was more difficult than you could ever imagine. It wasn't just the physical taxing of it. It was the mental and emotional. I mean, you're on a Marine Corps base. It's at Quantico. The FBI Academy is situated on this large, Quantico base. And it's intense. And they really are. They're trying to see, are you strong enough to be an FBI agent? Are you strong enough to overcome the stresses that you're going to face? And are you going to be able to function under pressure? And I'll never forget. I mean, the legal training, I was, very comfortable with the academic side, being in the classroom, a lot of legal training, interviews and interrogations. But then when it came to the practical application unit section, there's something called Hogan's Alley at Quantico, and it's literally like a town. Like you've got homes and banks and stores, and you're learning all of these things about doing takedowns, operations, arrests, search warrants, how to gather evidence, firearms. That was intense. Firearms was very, very intense. And also the defensive tactics. I mean, they literally taught us, if you have to defend your life, we need to know that you could literally take someone down with your bare hands.
It's incredible. So did you have any experience with firearms before you joined? You're from Houston, Texas.
I know, right? You would think. And that was the funny part. I went into it and I'd shot guns before for fun, actually out in Utah.
Were you good at it?
For fun, I was.
Yeah.
But as soon as you get on the firing line and you've got someone breathing down your back and a firearms instructor literally screaming at you, I struggled with it. And I remember holding my gun and my palms would be sweating and I'm holding my Glock and I was just like, oh my gosh, this guy needs to stop screaming at me. But it made me better. And I almost failed out of firearms. It was a very faith-promoting experience for me because it was the first time in my life I'd never really failed at anything. And God was basically saying, look, I'm going to put you in your place here and I'm going to humble you and you're going to be down on your knees praying. And there was a defining moment for me. And I know it sounds kind of silly, but to me, it was a very spiritual experience. I'd been doing horrible. And it was like the last moment. It's like you have one day basically to get up to par on this shooting. And if you don't, you are out of the academy, you are done. I went from shooting in the 50s and 60s, Martha. Literally, I went up, I said a prayer in my dorm room and I prayed to God. I poured out my soul. I'm like, I need help. Like, this is it. I went back from that lunch break. All of a sudden, I was shooting in the 90s. And the firearms instructor was like, what happened? And I said, look, I don't know. There's probably angels helping me. I literally said a prayer. I qualified the next day with flying colors. I never failed firearms ever again. I qualified over 50 times with amazing scores. But again, it was intense. It was difficult. And so, it wasn't just a physically and emotionally trying experience. It was testing my faith. And do I really believe in God? And that's really what my journey has been. I could not have been through this journey without my friends, my family, and my faith in God.
What do you remember about, and you write about a lot of these instances in the book, but you were dealing in human trafficking situations, school shooting, horrific school shooting situations. What do you remember about the first time that you had to use your gun?
Well, I have never had to fire at a human being. Every operation you go on, you're always, when you're an agent, you're pretty much armed 24/7 besides, swimming, working out at the gym, or sleeping. I was armed all the time. I flew armed. I talk about that in the book. People always looked at me. They're like, there's no way that girl's an FBI agent. Every operation you go on, you have your gun. It would be drawn out of my holster. And again, I'm working violent crime. I started in white collar, but then I moved to violent crime. These are very, very dangerous individuals. But yeah, I used my gun every day. Did I ever have to fire at someone? No, I did not. And I'm very fortunate and blessed for that. But agents, they do. You have to defend your life and defend others on a daily basis.
Give us your thoughts as you look back on what happened in Parkland, Florida, because I think it wasn't too long after that you ended up leaving the FBI. Tell us your thoughts on that day as you reflect on it, Nicole.
Okay, so that was February 14th of 2018. So I ended up leaving in 2022. But that day, I'll never forget where I was. I was actually the Crimes on the High Seas coordinator in addition to other responsibilities on my violent crime squad. So I was actually at Norwegian Cruise Lines conducting an annual training for all of their captains that had come in from all around the world and their doctors and their staffs. And I'll never forget, I got an email and it basically said school shooting. And we would get these kind of false alarms a lot, there's been a mass shooting. And you're like, there's no mass shooting. A lot of times false alarms. it was a real one. It was the real deal. And I remember telling him, look, I've got to go. And I asked my boss, do you need me? And he's like, yes, we need you. All hands on deck. You need to get up here immediately. I was down in Doral. I went lights and sirens, full throttle, all the way up to Parkland. It was extremely emotional. I was getting text messages from people that knew of children that were attending that school. Hey, I know you're on the violent crime squad for the FBI. Can you check on this person? Can you check on this person? Arriving at the scene, it was total chaos and pandemonium. It was horrifying. Students were still piling out of the school. The shooter was still on the loose. It was intense. It was dark. It was scary. He was actually taken into custody by a local police officer. The carnage and the death, it's not something that I like to focus on, but it is important to acknowledge that FBI agents and law enforcement in general, we see a lot of very, very dark things. You're the first one on the scene before even, medical. Like, you've got to go in there and stop the threats. And I always say it on Fox, stop the killing and stop the dying, and that's your job. So eventually we got all of the kids out of the school, and because I'd worked a mass shooting just a year before, the Fort Lauderdale airport shooting was my first mass shooting that I worked, they turned to me and they said, look, we want you to be the point person with Broward Sheriff's Office, and we need to get this scene done. And it was a very daunting task, and to imagine all of these students that had just witnessed their classmates getting killed. And literally we were seeing people that had blood all over them. And, you've got to obtain all of that evidence. You can't just let them go. And so no one was allowed to leave. We took them to a hotel nearby, everyone. So it was multiple scenes going on at once. You've got the crime scene at the actual school, working that. And then I ended up going from the school over to the hotel. For me, Martha, the worst and most horrific thing, there were some dark things I saw and experienced. But having to tell those parents that their children were never coming home. I had to do death notifications. I was actually asked by Pam Bondi, who at the time was the Attorney General for the state of Florida. And I remember looking at her when she asked me, and I thought, no, someone else, I can't do this. Like, I'm not the right person to do this. And she literally looked me in the eye and she said, I want you to be the one to tell these families. Mm-hmm. And sorry, it's something that I'll be emotional about, because to have to wreck the dreams and lives of so many people and parents, it's every parent's worst nightmare. Yeah. But I learned so much even from that tragic situation. And I continue to maintain friendships with a lot of those families. We're in law enforcement and you're supposed to be taking care of them and protecting them. But in reality, these people have blessed my life tremendously. And to see their courage and their ability to continue to live and to do amazing things and to make a difference in this country as a result of their loss speaks volumes. And so I have such tremendous amount of respect for those families, for those victims. And what's sad is that tragedy should have never happened. It was preventable. And in the after action review, it was very clear that was very much preventable on many levels.
He was on the radar.
He was on the radar
a number of times.
Everyone
he
knew.
Never have been. He wasn't allowed on campus, right?
Everyone knew who he was. Even the students were like, it had to have been Nicholas Cruz.
Oh my God.
The FBI failed the American people. They ended up getting a lawsuit filed against them, along with other agencies and organizations that failed. But you know what, Martha? The FBI, it was. They got sued, and they should have, but no amount of money can replace a human life. But it was so discouraging to me, and I was seeing FBI too, which I equate to the negative FBI, what we're not proud of. They were so focused on diversity. Christopher Wray had been in the FBI Miami division 1 week before the Parkland school shooting, because that was their obsession at the agency at the time, was diversity instead of focusing on the mission. I wish that Director Wray had been focused on training your employees on how to take a tip, because there was a credible tip that came into the FBI 1 month before, but they were so focused on diversity that we ended up losing 17 beautiful souls in Parkland. It could have been stopped. And that was one thing that a lot of Americans don't realize, is that I was there at that diversity event. I was forced to attend because I was a woman. And the next week, the Parkland shooting happens. And my first thought was, I sure wish that Director Ray's priority had been on training employees on properly how to take tips rather than focusing on diversity.
So this is what led you to a couple years later to leave the agency. And you talk about FBI 1 and FBI 2, and you talk about your reaction to Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and the FBI and, their focus on, we're going to make sure he's not elected. And, you can smell the Trump spirit at Walmart and all of those horrible things that they said. How hard was that part for you when you actually loved what you were doing at the FBI and you were absolutely at the top of your game. They wanted you to run these operations. Pam Bondi's calling on you personally to handle sensitive, difficult things. So talk about your realization that you had to leave.
Right. And so again, remember, I walked away from finance. I mean, I was making way more money on Wall Street than I was at the FBI, but I wasn't driven by money. I was motivated to serve the American people. So I gave up a lot. And remember the training, it was very intense. It was difficult, a long process to get into the FBI. I put a lot of effort into it. Days and nights. I mean, I would work like 36, 48 hours at a time on a regular basis, but I did it because I loved what I was doing, and I was happy to serve the American people and sacrifice my own comforts for others. That's FBI One work. I was working with amazing patriots, warriors. It wasn't just me. It was a team of amazing people that I was blessed to work with. But I'm telling you, it was July 5th of 2016 when James Comey came out and had that press conference saying that no reasonable prosecutor would charge Hillary Clinton for mishandling classified information. That was the defining moment for us, and I will never forget where I was. And I thought, wow, the FBI is now a political pawn. Rules for thee, but not for me. If I'd done the same thing, I would be in jail in 2 seconds. And it was just this continuous pattern. And so I started noticing FBI too. And now all of America's noticing what I was seeing starting back in 2016. Arctic frost is at full throttle. And I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. But that was, for me, the first moment is that this is really not right. This is not fair. And there are people that are not doing the right thing with their law enforcement power. What Peter Strzok and Lisa Page did was absolutely despicable and wrong, along with Andrew McCabe, James Comey, and so many others that we're hearing about. But it didn't stop then. It continued. And that was the problem. They had top cover. James Comey, he was so disgusted that he got fired. James Comey, you deserve to get fired. I mean, when Trump fired you, you should have been, you never should have been the director in the first place. He was so pious and self-righteous, but it was actually a total fraud. I mean, he was so corrupt. And so we started seeing this pattern of FBI 2 creeping in, even down in FBI Miami. But you're right. I was focusing on violent crime, trying to stop human traffickers. And I loved what I was doing. I felt like I was making a difference. But Martha, it got so bad that I no longer recognized the FBI that I'd signed up for because it was so political. And I can give you examples. I mean, they're in the book, like especially at the end under the Biden administration. I would walk into the office and I literally felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. And you didn't know what was going to happen. And I myself am a conservative Republican. And that's really no one's business. I didn't inflict that onto my investigations. I was a fair and unbiased investigator. But even internally at the FBI, if you were, we even joked that we wouldn't be shocked if they had the voter rolls and they knew who we voted for. And if you voted for Trump, they're going to come after you. And so it was that bad at the end that they were going after Trump supporters, conservatives, and Americans think it was just, externally. It was happening internally at the FBI. And it seemed that people that spoke up, they would get retaliated against. And so a lot of the rot started up at headquarters at the Washington field office as well, but it trickled down to the individual field offices. So in the book, it's a progression. I talk about, what led me there, my motivation, my background, and my faith, which I think is important to understand what drives somebody. And then I got in there and I loved what I was doing. I felt like I was making a difference. And I have to tell you, a defining moment again was when my best friend, Special Agent Laura Schwarzenberger, and Daniel Alfin shot and killed in the line of duty, taking down a child predator. They were executing a search warrant for a child predator, the most dangerous. No SWAT support for them. But yet at the same time, the FBI was liberally and adamantly forcing SWAT to go on January 6th misdemeanor arrests for nonviolent offenders. Do you know how offensive that is? Why didn't they have the same sense of urgency for a child predator? Well, do you know why? Because it didn't fit the narrative. And so they just put the full force political intimidation. If you were a Trump supporter, they're coming after you. And so it was one thing after another. In the last chapter, it's all FBI too. And it was like I literally had to create an internal table of contents for the last chapter because it was one thing after another after another. The raid at Mar-a-Lago, what they did to Mark Houck, the Catholic memo, the January 6th obsession, the diversity going off, the DEI initiatives going off the charts, where people are actually getting hurt and killed. The way that they handled the Larry Nassar investigation, they completely dropped the ball. I mean, it's disgusting and wrong.
It was horrific. That was horrific. I mean, and think about those families, which I know you have.
Yeah.
And we interviewed some of those families as well. He was absolutely on their radar, and they could have prevented the abuse of so many of those young women. And it really does speak to the priorities. What is your sense now of what things are like under Kash Patel? What are you hearing from, I'm sure you still have agents who are friends.
I do. And, I have to say that Kash Patel walked into a disaster zone. I don't envy him. It's a very thankless job, frankly. It's difficult. It's hard. I think that he's doing the best he can with what he's been given. I do think he's working tirelessly. I've had contact with Kash Patel. I know that he does care about the FBI. And I know that he does want to let good cops be good cops. And I remember speaking to him about that. And I said, Kash, one thing that you're really going to want to focus on is FBI 1. These are good people. These are honest, hard workers. You've got to build up FBI 1 because the morale of FBI 1 was completely bulldozed under the Biden administration. There was no morale left. It was horrifying how bad it was internally. So he's trying to build up FBI 1 while taking down and obliterating FBI 2. So it's a very fine balancing act, right? He's got to kind of discover. And the other thing is, who do you trust? And that's what's so sad. And we're seeing that coming out again with Arctic Frost. These are people in positions of power that you think, they're the leadership. This is who we're supposed to be following. FBI employees and FBI 1, I wouldn't just take marching orders just because you're an executive. I really don't care who you are. If you don't have integrity, I'm not going to listen and I'm not going to obey. And I don't care if you want to fire me, go ahead. And there's a very profound moment in my book, Martha, probably the most powerful thing that I think I wrote about. The last conversation I had with my best friend the day before she was murdered and killed in the line of duty. We had a conversation I will never forget, and we were talking about how we would not be involved. She herself had been on the SWAT team before in FBI Albuquerque. What she saw them doing to these January 6th individuals, she was appalled by. And again, this is just barely a month into those investigations, but they were still going, they were going full force. She said, Nicole, I am not going to be participating in anything that is politically motivated for the wrong reasons. I will not do it. And if the FBI wants to, I'm going to tell them no. If I'm asked, I'm going to tell them no. And if they want to fire me, go ahead and fire me. Her last words, if they're going to take me down, they're going to take me down for my morals. And I looked at Laura and I said, you know what? I am so grateful that I have she was my confidant and best friend in the FBI. I said, I am with you. We are going to stand together. We are going to do the right thing no matter what. We will not cave to pressure. Our integrity is more important than a pension. We will not do it. And the next morning she was shot and killed.
Oh my God.
And that was it.
And she didn't have the backup that she should have had in what was clearly a dangerous situation, a child predator who does not want to go down.
Correct.
Quietly, for sure. It's...
And on top of that, you know what? The FBI didn't pay for her memorial service or for Dan's, and they actually never had an after-action review to tell us what happened. But yet I was getting... Literally, it felt like 20 emails a week about diversity. I thought, you know what, can we please focus on the mission and what happened to our brother and sister in the FBI and please start getting back on track and doing the right thing? And under Director Ray, I realized, you know what, this agency is not going to change. He's not going to turn around the agency because in his eyes, there was nothing wrong. And that's the sad part. Like FBI too, they don't even acknowledge their flaws. And so you can't fix something if you can't acknowledge that there's a problem.
So I'm curious where you see yourself going next. It's easy to imagine you doing a lot of things, potentially running for office or continuing your TV career. What do you think is next?
That's a great question. That's the golden question. I mean, I pray every day to God. I'm like, God, just lead me, guide me. And I talked about this in the first page of my book. Lead me, guide me, walk beside me, help me find the way. Mm-hmm. And he led me on 9/11. He's led me every step of the way. So Martha, when I figure that out, I will make sure to let you know. But I think as long as we open ourselves up and we say, God, how can you use me as an instrument in your hands for good? I will do that. And again, I have a very non-traditional path and, it's definitely not what I imagined. I thought I would get married and have a big, beautiful family. I've never been married. I don't have children. It's what I always dreamed of, but I trust that God knows he's in control and I'm going to trust his journey for me. So once I figure that out, I will definitely let you know. But I love working with Fox. I love working with you and all the amazing anchors. Y'all are incredible people. And it's just so refreshing to come somewhere where people are so respectful and they're patriots and they're warriors and y'all are smart and brilliant and respectful. And I really enjoy that. So I want to say thank you. And I do. I know that when people see my face on your program, they're like, oh no, there must have been a horrible tragedy. But I do. And I get emotional sometimes on TV because I am a human being. I'm not a robot and I do feel these things. So I'm just going to continue along this beautiful path and do the best that I can.
Well, I think that you are such an inspiration for young women, and I hope everyone listens to this message that you can you can switch gears. And all of these things have been, as you say, part of God's plan for you. So he has been building your life of service in all of these ways. And we love having you as part of the Fox family. So I hope you don't go anywhere. And it is true. I mean, I think that when you work at Fox, it liberates you to feel that you can share your thoughts on your faith or on your belief in patriotism and the country. And you have all of these people around who support it. We're not all robots. We all think very differently about a lot of things in the world and about coverage and all of that. But it is, sort of a place that supports us finding our path and leaning on our faith and all of these good things in a world that is, I think so lost in so many ways. So as I said, I think your story is incredibly inspiring, not just for young women, but for young men, anybody who wants to change their path and to serve their country. So Nicole, thank you so much. This book is fantastic. And I love the picture on the cover.
Thank you.
It's called The Two FBIs, The Bravery and Betrayal I Saw in My Time at the Bureau. Nicole Parker, former FBI special agent. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a book that I think is going to be a huge bestseller. And I think that everyone should educate themselves about what can go on in a government agency so that we all are wise to the political pressures that can infiltrate even these top institutions. But we have to remember the FBI one people.
That's right. We got to praise the good.
Remember those FBI one people. I know a number of people who made... A couple people who made similar decisions that you made and left the FBI, but we also want to support these people who are coming in and make it a strong agency, which I know is what you want as well.
Yes.
Nicole, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That is the Untold story. What a great one, right? Nicole Parker joining me today. I'm Martha McCallum. We'll see you next time.